Welcome to Student Spotlight, where each month we'll be spotlighting a different graduate student from the English department at Oklahoma State. My name is Sean Kulikin, the English grad student coordinator, and I'll be your host. And today I'm very excited to meet with our guest from the TESOL program, Amy Takebe. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
So, Amy, the way this thing works is I ask you 5 questions and you give us 5 answers. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Okay, question number 1. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on here at OSU?
Sure. So my name is Amy Takebe, and I'm originally from Hitachi City, Japan. I was born and raised in Japan. I lived there for my first 18 years of my life in Hitachi. It's about 100 miles north of Tokyo, so it's really in the countryside, but I really like it. It kind of has this this Pacific Ocean and mountains, and it's just a beautiful area. But yeah, so I was born and raised in Japan, and I moved to Oklahoma when I was 18 to get my undergraduate degree from Oklahoma Christian in Edmond. And then I continued my education here at OSU as an MA in TESOL. And then after getting my MA, I moved back to Japan and worked there for 5 years, and then moved back to OSU for my PhD. And for my dissertation, I'm working on language use in disaster warning contexts, particularly in Japanese disaster warning contexts. And it's a 3-part study. So the first study looks at language use in Twitter context. But I'm not just like randomly selecting Twitter posts, but I look at municipal governments' official disaster warnings on Twitter, and see how language is being used, particularly the directive forms like evacuate, do not wait, or evacuate to a higher ground, or a typhoon is approaching, please, start packing your emergency bag, that sort of call to action statements. And then my second part of my study looks at language use in broadcasting context. So I kind of look at how language is being used with other meaning-making resources like images or sounds, and see how language and other features work together to kind of frame this sense of urgency. So I do a multimodal discourse analysis in the second study, and then my third study. So far, the first 2 studies look at linguistic production, but the third study, I look at how language is perceived by ordinary language users, aka potential warning recipients. So I interview a group of Japanese speakers who are living in Japan, and also a group of North American English speakers who are currently living in Japan as well, and kind of do a little not a little, but it was a serious systematic interview. But I do a cross-cultural, cross-linguistic analysis of how people perceive these different forms of directives, in different degrees of politeness, and see how they respond, and kind of investigate their implicit idea about language through their narratives about their own disaster experience, or their ideas about how language should be used in broadcasting contexts or in other institutional contexts. So it's a really cool study. I like spending every moment with my dissertation. So yeah, it's cool. So.
Wow, this is really fascinating. I've never heard anything like this. Somebody started something like this at OSU. Wow. Yeah, one of my follow-up questions was going to be why Japan? You answered that. But yeah, I really like too how you're looking at both like what the government and broadcasting is saying, but also the personal stories too.
Yeah, and it really came out of the conversation. I didn't go into the interview expecting to hear stories, but of course, when you are and of course, I, strategically plan the interview questions so that it won't sound like an interview, but, we had snacks and we had coffee and tea together, and we would go off topic sometimes, but I'll make sure that it will come back to my, main purpose of my interview. But, it would just come out of the, just talking about language use. They would say, well, back when in 2011, when the big tsunami came, one of my informants said, I heard, in the radio that they used to say this and I was so scared. Or for participants from Hokkaido, they also had earthquakes in a different year, and they actually experienced blackouts. So like the complete city was out of power for like weeks. And, they would just naturally just come through, the interview. And it was just like, I could actually, carry out narrative analysis in addition to the discourse analysis and the folk linguistic analysis to see how the warning recipients or potential warning recipients would perceive, government or institutional identity through their stories. Like, how are they locating themselves in the story, and how they're picturing or drawing these figures that are sending official warnings through their narratives. So it's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
For sure. And I just think of all the things that are always going around in the world as far as natural disasters. We just had something, in Turkey, and and I'm sure what you're studying, the breakdown of language here, it could be applied so many other places too around the world.
Yeah, and it's kind of well, it's kind of like, I don't know how to say this, but it's kind of interesting that COVID happened at the same time that I was doing my disaster warning research. COVID is another kind of, disaster. It's not natural like earthquakes or floods or, winter storms, but, there were things that I could look through the frameworks that I was using in COVID broadcast, like how we saw so many reds in the maps, at the first stage of COVID to kind of indicate which state has so many people with COVID, and then how the announcers would use different kinds of directives to request people to wear a mask in the public. So yeah, it's definitely applicable to other, hazard situations, but warnings really, disaster warnings for natural hazard really came from my own experience. My mother actually was living in Japan when the big tsunami earthquake happened. And my parents are both Americans, obviously. But Japanese is their additional language. So, when the earthquake happened, a different kind of discourse can emerge. It's not your ordinary, coffee table conversation that you hear in the language. Is actually technical words that you've probably never heard. It's being repeated constantly. Everybody's in fear. So it's an environment that you never experience. And when I saw that, so I was getting my MA when that happened. So I was in Oklahoma, and I was, as a third culture kid, I was translating information from Japanese to English for my mother mainly. And it really constantly made me think, what can I do as a linguist, to kind of build this disaster resilient communities? And obviously there's a language gap, even for those who've been living in Japan for more than, 3-4 decades. And it just really inspired me to go beyond teaching English as a second language, but kind of develop my identity as an applied linguist to see what I know as, from my experience in teaching English, and also as a researcher interested in discourse analysis to build that knowledge or bring that knowledge to help other practitioners in the field of emergency management. So yeah, it's really cool. I just love what I do.
Very cool. Wow. This is very cool. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. We're going to go to question number 2. So question number 2, why did you choose to come to OSU?
Yeah, so like I said, I got my MA here in 2011. So the reason why I came back to get my PhD was because I knew the professors here, and it was not just knowing them, but actually understanding that they are world leading scholars in the field of applied linguistics, teaching English as a second language. And I also knew the expectation for graduate students and the great opportunities that graduate students would have as GTAs or other research assistants. So yeah.
Excellent. Hey, that's great. Yeah. And you said you got your master's here,
Yes.
and you were here in 2011.
Mhm.
All right, good. Question number 3, what are some of the best things about this program that have happened to you that you'd like to share?
The best thing that happened to me, there's so many great things that happened to me, but I would say just having the opportunity to develop professionally is just phenomenal. Like having assistantships to teach, composition classes, or if you're in TESOL and applied linguistics, you have opportunities to teach international composition classes for undergraduate students whose English is their additional language. And for there are other programs like the Writing Center. I have a lot of friends who are working there as consultants or assistant directors or taking on other leadership roles. And in the TESOL linguistic program, and for everyone, we also have the language studies lab. So you can get to play with other cool, linguistic tools for linguistic research. And it's just that opportunity. Like if you think about when you're applying for jobs, of course, your resume should be beautiful with, your research and your research agenda. But if you're especially interested in working in academia, having that teaching experience, is so important. And I am so grateful for the English department to trust their graduate students to teach and lead and develop curriculum for compositions and international comp and other content classes. So that's definitely like having that opportunity to every semester for me develop, my identity as a scholar in academia is great. For me personally, I'm currently working as an assistant director in the English Language and Intercultural Center on campus. It's housed in the OSU Global department. So, and my role is an assistant director. So I do mostly administrative jobs. So I'm not teaching right now, but it really gives me a chance to see how things work in the back ends. So I have so much respect for OSU staff and faculty who are making sure that everything can run smoothly. If you have a research project, there is always someone who's working behind the scene to make sure that all the paperworks are submitted and all that. So yeah, just having that opportunity to work and learn from, so many great people, in the field. And I'm so lucky to have wonderful colleagues at the center that I get to learn from them every day. So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that you've gotten the chance to do some administration and a whole lot of teaching, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I agree. I really love doing this job right now, grad student coordinator. It's kind of a little admin work. But I loved coming to OSU in my first semester. I was in the classroom teaching. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, okay, thanks. Question number 4. Do you have any advice for other students and future students?
I do. So especially for those who are coming to Stillwater and take in-person classes at OSU, I think it's important to know about the city of Stillwater. It's a beautiful place. I like it. And I got my, undergrad in Edmond in Oklahoma, and Stillwater is about an hour away from Edmond or so, but each city, of course, is different and it's a different culture. And for me, coming from a small university in Edmond to OSU Stillwater was a big transition. And, knowing that there's no Target in Stillwater was a big shock. But but there are still cool local businesses that I like to go. Like I'm planning to go to the coffee shop downtown after this. I like to go to the botanic garden. So I think it's really important to research the town that you're going to live for the next 4, 5, 6 years if you're a PhD, 2 or 3 years if you're MA. But I think it's important to find that community that you feel safe in the town that you're going to live, and to find places that you like to go and feel comfortable and have a good time. I think that's very important to kind of, and that will lead to, a healthy work-life balance as well. Like if you have a hard time in your classes, you can always look forward to going to a coffee shop to kind of cheer me up, cheer yourself up. So yeah, so I think it's really important to have time dedicated to researching, this area that you're going to live.
Yeah, great point. And I'm so glad you brought up that important part about the Target. I miss Target as well. And
Yeah.
I would go to Edmond just to go to that Target.
Yeah. Or I'll call it Target, but it's
Target,
just my thing.
yes.
But yeah, but again, there are so many great, local businesses that kind of make up the loss of Target.
And free Walmarts.
yeah. And they still have, if you are someone who likes to collect cute stationeries, there's a really cute shop called Typo Market just across from Balanced Coffee that I like to go also. So, there are many great shops and other businesses. Like we have Kicker headquarter in Stillwater. I mean, Hideaway Pizza, the real Hideaway Pizza is in Stillwater. So yeah, there are great places to go. If you like to go to the nature, we have, a couple of lakes and yeah, so.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, final question. And this is like a fun question. Question number 5, what's one fun, unique hobby, interest, or memory you'd like to share? This could be related to OSU and your focus or just completely random.
Yeah, so I want to share, let me see. I have many fun memories, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the people that I got to meet through my graduate studies, the professors, the students. They're all amazing. But I want to share on that topic of meeting great people because my dissertation is interdisciplinary, bridging linguistics and hazard and disaster science. I took some hazard and disaster management or disaster response classes along with my required courses that I have to take in the English department. And one summer, and I like to take summer classes, by the way. One summer I took Intro to Emergency Management, and the classmates were just amazing. And we came from all different kinds of backgrounds, and disaster science is actually a multidisciplinary field. So my classmates, I had students from the agriculture department. I had a graduate student who was actually working in Washington for FEMA, and I had international students who were also representing their home country's governmental agency, and here I am, the applied linguist. And of course, the first question that I asked when we first met, I was nervous, meeting new people from different departments, and they're learning about their interests in their research agenda. And when we were reading through the syllabus, the first question that I asked was, okay, so what's the required citation style? Of course, an English major would say that, right? And of course, it wasn't like what she's saying like that, but it was cool to kind of see how my identity as an English major came out that way. But everyone was great, and I really got to know cool people in the field. I had someone who was already in the military taking classes online remotely. And yeah, it was just a great summer. And the textbook that I used for that class, it was Introduction to Emergency Management. We have a second edition coming out, or it came out last year, and I was featured in that textbook. and as one of the next generations in emergency management in hazard science. So that was kind of cool, full circle moment for me, like to have some ideas about what's it like to study, disaster warnings, and then taking that summer course and taking other courses in emergency management and the sociology of disaster, and now having a feature in the textbook. So it kind of shows also how welcoming the hazard disaster science community is. It was also that summer when I found out about Bill Anderson Fund, which I'm a fellow of, and it's a fund for graduate students who are studying hazard and disaster science who come from historically underrepresented fields. So the fund is to support graduate students and also increase the number of historically underrepresented students in the field, because that's where really we need support and fund. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
Wow, congratulations on that. But also that sounds like a wonderful class that you took, and you got to meet a whole bunch of other different people.
Yeah, and it was and that's how I met my outside committee member, Dr. Dave Neal, and he's been really supportive throughout my journey. Like I still remember visiting his office saying, I want to study disaster warning and I have a linguistic background. What can I do? And he gave me like really cool directions that I could take, and, resources, articles, books. And yeah, it's just been wonderful. And I feel really blessed to have, really wonderful committee members, including Dr. Link and Dr. Preston, and of course, Dr. Motor. So
yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, Amy. This was a great interview, and thanks for being on our show. And thank you to our viewers for watching. And so we'll see you, to our viewers, we'll see you next month for another episode of Student Spotlight. Thanks again, Amy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.